The day of my sister's wedding was supposed to be a celebration, filled with love, laughter, and family. Instead, it became the day my world turned upside down. The day I discovered the truth about my family and unearthed the astonishing secrets Aunt Catherine had kept hidden. The morning began in a predictable flurry of chaos. Amanda, my older sister and the undisputed queen of the day, barked orders with the precision of a military general. She stood resplendent in her designer wedding gown, a dress so extravagant it probably cost more than I made in an entire year teaching kindergarten. "Sarah, where are the VIP welcome bags?" Amanda's voice cut through the bustle, sharp and demanding. She turned her attention to me, her perfectly manicured fingers adjusting her glittering veil for what must have been the 100th time. Her gaze dropped to my feet, and she sighed theatrically. "And you're not seriously wearing those shoes to my wedding, are you?" I glanced down at my sensible heels, the nicest pair I owned. "These are fine, Amanda," I replied, keeping my tone even. She rolled her eyes, an expression I had grown all too familiar with over the years. "This is why Aunt Catherine always liked me better," she muttered, half under her breath. "You have no sense of class." The mention of Aunt Catherine was like a knife to my heart. It had only been 3 months since she passed, and I still felt the ache of her absence. Unlike the rest of my family, who chased after wealth and status with an almost religious fervor, Aunt Catherine had been different. She lived in a cozy little cottage, tended a vibrant garden, and found joy in life's simple pleasures. She was my safe haven in a family obsessed with appearances. "Don't start with Aunt Catherine again," Amanda snapped, her voice tinged with annoyance. She was just a weird old lady who could have lived like a queen but chose to play pauper instead. Honestly, thank God she left everything to charity like she always said she would. Can you imagine if she'd left her fortune to you? You'd probably waste it on crayons for your students or something equally ridiculous. I bit my tongue, unwilling to argue. Amanda would never understand the afternoons I'd spent with Aunt Catherine in her garden, learning about herbs and flowers while she shared stories and wisdom. Amanda had always dismissed her as an eccentric recluse, too focused on her own social climbing ambitions to notice the richness of Aunt Catherine's life. As the ceremony drew closer, I found myself at the reception hall, adjusting place cards and trying to stay out of Amanda's way. That's when an elderly gentleman in an impeccable suit approached me. "Miss Sarah Bennet?" he asked, his tone formal but kind. "Yes, that's me," I replied. The man extended a heavy envelope, sealed with an ornate wax seal. "I'm Harold Winchester, your late Aunt Catherine's attorney. She left strict instructions that this letter be delivered to you precisely 3 months after her passing, specifically on this day." My hands trembled as I accepted the envelope. It felt significant, almost sacred. Before I could open it, Amanda's shrill voice sliced through the air. "Sarah, what are you doing? The ceremony starts in 45 minutes. She froze when she saw the envelope in my hands. "What's that?" "It's a letter from Aunt Catherine," I said quietly. "Her lawyer just delivered it." Amanda's face twisted into a scowl. "Oh, for God's sake. Even from the grave, that woman is causing drama. Just throw it away, Sarah. This is my day." At that moment, our parents arrived, drawn by the commotion. My mother's sharp eyes took in the scene, her polished demeanor slipping into irritation. "What's going on here?" "Aunt Catherine left Sarah a letter," Amanda said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Delivered today of all days." Our father, ever the pragmatist, checked his Rolex and frowned. "Sarah, put that away. The governor and his wife will be arriving any moment. This is no time for distractions." But for the first time in my life, I refused to back down. There was something about the weight of that envelope, the timing of its delivery, that made me feel as though it held answers I desperately needed. "I'm opening it," I said firmly. "Don't you dare." Amanda lunged for the envelope, but I stepped back, clutching it protectively. "You are not ruining my wedding with whatever nonsense that crazy old woman left you." Ignoring her protests, I carefully broke the seal. Inside were several documents and a letter written in Aunt Catherine's elegant handwriting. I unfolded the letter, and as I read, The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "My dearest Sarah," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. And your sister is about to marry the investment banker she believes will give her the life of luxury she's always wanted. But there are truths you need to know." I blinked, my heart pounding. "For years, your family dismissed me as eccentric and modest, content to live a simple life in my cottage. What they never understood was that the simplicity was a choice, not a necessity. Was the CEO of Montgomery Industries. The cottage, the garden, the quiet life. It was my sanctuary, not a reflection of my means. While your parents and Amanda saw only my little home, you saw me. You appreciated what truly mattered. Kindness, integrity, and love." I glanced up, my family's impatient faces blurring as I continued reading. "That's why I am leaving everything to you. The estate, the company, the investments. All of it is yours. Use it wisely, my dear Sarah. I know you will." The documents confirmed it. Aunt Catherine had left me everything. The modest woman I had adored was the secret owner of a global empire worth billions. $89 million to be exact. Amanda's voice shattered the silence. "What does it say?" she demanded, her tone high-pitched and desperate. I looked up, meeting their shocked expressions. "Aunt Catherine wasn't poor," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. "She was the CEO of Montgomery Industries. And she left everything to me." The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda's face went ghostly pale, her elaborate makeup unable to mask her disbelief. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. My father stammered something about family obligations, but I wasn't listening. For the first time in my life I felt seen. Aunt Catherine had believed in me when no one else did. And now, it was time to honor her legacy. The day after Aunt Catherine's letter changed my life, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into my purse, and turned to Amanda, who was already livid. "Where are you going?" she shrieked, her designer gown trembling with every furious gesture. "You can't leave. I'm about to get married. We need to discuss this." For the first time, I looked at her without fear or hesitation. "No, Amanda," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You made it very clear this is your day. So celebrate it. I have more important things to take care of." Her protests echoed through the grand hall as I walked out of the hotel, head held high. In my purse was a small, old-fashioned key, another part of Aunt Catherine's legacy. It was the key to her cottage, a place that had always felt like a sanctuary. But now I knew it wasn't just a cottage. It was the starting point of my new life. Outside, Mr. Winchester, Aunt Catherine's attorney, stood waiting by a sleek black car. He gave me a warm, approving nod. "There's a car ready, Miss Bennet," he said. "And the board of directors is expecting you tomorrow morning at 9. Your aunt spoke of you often and always with great pride." I nodded, gratitude and determination welling up inside me. As the car pulled away, I silenced the barrage of messages lighting up my phone. Amanda and my parents had suddenly remembered I existed, but their calls were too little, too late. They'd had years to show me kindness. Now they could live with their choices. The car wound its way through familiar streets, heading toward Aunt Catherine's cottage. My cottage now. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. The next chapter. The following morning, I stood before the towering skyscraper that housed Montgomery Industries headquarters. The building was sleek and imposing, a symbol of wealth and power. As I stepped inside, the security guard greeted me warmly. "Good morning, Miss Bennet. Mr. Winchester is waiting for you in the penthouse office." The penthouse office, my office now. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. But what caught my attention wasn't the luxurious decor or the expansive skyline. It was a modest herb garden tucked into one corner, its green leaves vibrant under the morning light. "Your aunt spent every morning tending to that garden," Mr. Winchester said, noticing my gaze. "She said it reminded her of what really matters." I ran my fingers over the delicate leaves, memories of Aunt Catherine's wisdom flooding back. Those afternoons in her garden had been more than simple lessons about plants. She'd been preparing me for this moment, teaching me about patience, resilience, and the strength to lead with kindness. Before we could dive into the company's affairs, my phone buzzed. Against my better judgment, I turned it on, only to find 47 missed calls and over 100 messages. Amanda's name flashed across the screen. Her call coming in once again. Reluctantly, I answered. "You ruined my wedding," she screamed, her voice shrill with anger. "Half the guests left after your dramatic exit." The governor's wife was asking questions about Aunt Catherine and Montgomery Industries. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" "I'm sorry your wedding didn't go as planned," I said calmly, drawing strength from Aunt Catherine's lessons. "But I'm not sorry for opening that letter." Her tone shifted, dripping with saccharine sweetness. "We're family, Sarah. We need to discuss this inheritance as a family. Daddy's already talking to his lawyers. You can't possibly handle a company like Montgomery Industries. You're a kindergarten teacher, for God's sake." Mr. Winchester, who had been reviewing documents nearby, handed me a thick stack of papers. I smiled as I read the top page. "Actually, Amanda, I said. Aunt Catherine spent years preparing me for this. Every weekend I spent at her cottage, she wasn't just teaching me about gardening. She was teaching me about business, leadership, and investments. She documented everything, in case anyone ever doubted me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Amanda's true colors showed once again. "You conniving little snake," she spat. "You manipulated her. You turned her against us. We'll contest the will, and when we win, you'll regret this." I ended the call without another word and turned to Mr. Winchester. "They're going to contest the will," I said. He smiled knowingly. "Your aunt anticipated that. Would you like to see the rest of what was in that envelope?" What followed was both shocking and vindicating. The remaining documents detailed years of my family's deceit. Amanda's staggering credit card debt, my parents' failed investment schemes, and most damning of all, evidence that they had attempted to have Aunt Catherine declared mentally incompetent to seize control of her assets. She had kept meticulous records, emails, recorded conversations, even legal documents, to protect me from their schemes. The reckoning. As expected, my family filed a lawsuit. While they scrambled to find lawyers, I threw myself into learning every aspect of the company. The board of directors, who had known about my secret training, welcomed me with open arms. Aunt Catherine's longtime executive assistant, Maria, became my trusted guide through the corporate world. When my family's lawsuit finally reached court, it fell apart spectacularly. Their lawyers quit after reviewing the mountain of evidence against them. Amanda's tearful testimony about family loyalty was swiftly discredited by recordings of her mocking Aunt Catherine's pathetic lifestyle. The final blow came during a settlement meeting. My parents and Amanda arrived expecting to negotiate, only to find themselves facing the board of directors and a damning presentation of their financial misdeeds. "You've been using Montgomery Industries subsidiaries to secure loans and credit lines," I explained, watching their faces drain of color. "Aunt Catherine allowed it because she believed in giving family second chances. That ends today." "You can't do this," my father sputtered. "I can," I said firmly. "And I will. You have two choices. Drop the lawsuit and repay what you owe, or face charges for fraud." Defeated, they signed the papers. Amanda stormed out, screaming about betrayal. My mother wept, and my father tried one last time to appeal to family obligations. But I had finally learned to protect myself. Building a legacy. 6 months later, Montgomery Industries was thriving. I had launched a charitable foundation in Aunt Catherine's name, funding scholarships for underprivileged students and creating community gardens in urban areas. The herb garden in my office had expanded, and I spent each morning tending it, just as Aunt Catherine had. My family's fall from grace was front-page news. Amanda's husband was exposed as a fraud, and their marriage crumbled under the weight of debt and scandal. My parents downsized to a modest home, sending holiday cards full of hollow apologies. One quiet evening, I sat in Aunt Catherine's cottage, her diary in my lap. The final entry brought tears to my eyes. My dearest Sarah, the garden has always been more than herbs and flowers. It is life. The strongest plants are not the showiest but the ones with the deepest roots. You are ready now, my dear. Ready to lead, to thrive, to show the world that true power comes from kindness, not cruelty.